and welcome to TV9 News. I'm Amber Lynn. They were being sought after in a nationwide manhunt.
That'll rip apart your soul.
I'm gonna need a minute. Just cut to the movie plot synopsis. An impotent husband, driven by a fanatical desire to father children, forces his wife to undergo a dangerous experiment. The result? The birth of a multitude of monstrous things. Yeah, I guess that's why it's called Things, because there's things in the movie. I mean, it's a better title than Series of Random Images, because I think Turkish Star Wars had that as an alternate title. And it has 2.9 out of 10 on IMDb, 2.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I'm surprised it even has a page on Letterboxd, and 21% on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay. Alright. Let's do this. Let's talk about Things. So throughout the Blockbusters show, I've talked about plenty of so bad they're good movies. I've talked about the distinction between what makes a good so bad it's good movie and what makes a really bad one. Most of the time, I think the bad ones are the ones that try way too hard to be a so bad it's good movie, the ones that are intentionally low budget, and everyone's just mugging it up and hammy and just like, oh, we're making a dumb, schlocky B movie, oh, we're in on the joke. In my eyes, movies that are actually so bad they're good are the ones that at least try to be real movies, and they're just so bizarre and incompetent to the point where it's baffling and you want to keep watching it just to see how weird it is. Stuff like, you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space, The Room, Birdemic, Cool Cat Saves the Kids, Flying Ryan, maybe Amazing Bulk, I guess that counts. Then you got a movie like this, which I've heard a lot of people say is yet another entry in the best worst movie tier, but aside from a few things, I don't know. I don't know if I can say that. Before I talk about what happens in this movie, I want to set the stage like this. This movie is kind of like if the guy who did Maons, the Hands of Fate tried making his own version of Evil Dead, and the movie was extremely Canadian. That is pretty much the best way to describe this movie. Basically, the plot is extremely similar to Evil Dead, where a couple of bumbling young people go out to some kind of abandoned area out in the woods, far, far away from civilization. Except here it's supposed to be someone's house instead of just a shotgun cabin in the middle of nowhere. It's supposed to be someone's house, and who owns it comes up later, but it's basically these two Canadian guys with super thick Canadian accents. Like, when I say this movie is Canadian, I'm not talking like, oh, a bunch of American filmmakers went over to Canada because they could get easy tax write-offs making the movie or whatever. No, I mean, these are the most rural Canadian people you will ever see. They have the thick, stereotypical Canadian accents.
Oh, the blood is just dripping like maple syrup.
Hey, maybe like it's like if Terrence and Phillip made a movie. But even then, that's not a fair comparison, because you know what? When Terrence and Phillip made a movie, we at least got an awesome musical number with Uncle Fucker.
You're an Uncle Fucker, I must say.
You fucked your uncle yesterday.
Uncle Fucker, that's U-N-C-L-E. Fuck you, Uncle Fucker.
I think the best way to describe it is, it's kind of like if Bob and Doug McKenzie made a movie. That's the best way to describe these two main characters. They're stereotypically Canadian. They're always talking a bunch of nothing, talking about, oh yeah, buddy, let's go get some fucking beers, eh? And just kind of shooting the breeze. That makes up a larger majority of this film, but I'll get to that in a second. Here's the weird thing about this movie. The way it starts is so bizarre and so trippy, it makes you think that the rest of the movie is going to be this like weird, avant-garde, low-budget, straight-to-video thing. But no, not really. Most of it is just boring. It just feels like watching someone's fucking home movie. But the way the movie begins, we have some guy who does eventually come back later, but some guy who's having some kind of fantasy.
I want you to have my baby. My wife and I tried to have a baby, but we could never get one. Now it's up to you. My beautiful love.
And the weirdest thing about this whole opening fantasy sequence with this guy and this woman in the low-budget papier-mâché Halloween store devil mask, she gets naked, and we see everything. And it's like the only time in the movie where there's nudity. It's like the first scene, and it's like, okay, that's a way to start a film, I guess. Having a woman with this really cheap-ass looking Halloween store devil mask that looks like it was straight off the set of Turkish Star Wars, getting naked, showing her tits and bush. And then the fantasy ends when she unveils like a demon baby that's clearly just some Halloween decoration thing. And the lighting is so shitty you can barely make out what it even is. It's like, oh, I guess that's supposed to be some kind of devil spawn thing. And then he screams and then he wakes up on the couch.
Coochie, 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 coochie.
Going by the description of the movie, apparently this guy is so interested in the idea of having children, he sent his wife to some doctor who's named Dr. Lucas, and he's the guy that owns the house that the majority of this movie takes place in. And then there's this whole Manos the Hands of Fate style opening credit sequence where it's someone driving on like a bunch of dirt roads and back roads while shitty music plays. Even shittier music than in Manos. Like, every time there's music in this movie, it sounds like they just ran a demo loop on a Casio keyboard. Another thing, and I'm not Canadian, so I can't really say like if maybe there's a reason for this, but this came out in 1989, and yet for some reason everyone dresses like it's the 70s. Like, the way everyone dresses, almost every guy has like mullets, which I guess that's more of an 80s thing, I guess, but everyone has like 70s kind of clothing and like 70s porn star mustaches. They're trying to look like fucking Ron Jeremy or some shit. That or typical California hipsters, I guess. You know, they're trying to bring that look back, so who knows, maybe this movie was ahead of its time. They knew that that look was not going to go out of fashion with some people, I guess. Even though most of the people in this movie are just a bunch of average Joes who just decided to get a video camera and make a fucking movie, eh? There is one person of note. The biggest name that they were able to get was 80s and 90s porn star Amber Lynn, who is not really connected to the main plot. She pops up periodically throughout the movie as a news reporter who's also named Amber Lynn. And she just pops up every once in a while talking about something. It's not really connected to what's going on in the actual story, but yeah, every once in a while they just cut back to her.
Hi, and welcome to TV9 News. I'm Amber Lynn.
I'm Johnny Scott.
We are your hosts for today's broadcast.
Every time they show her, she looks like she's recording in like a high school AV room. Like, there's a bunch of monitors stacked behind her, and there's like 1 or 2 VCRs behind her as well. And you can totally tell she's just reading off of cue cards. Every once in a while, she just like looks over and then looks back, looks over, looks back. It's really funny.
A medical discovery by the world-renowned Dr. Lucas of Grizzly Flats. Scientists and surgeons alike are very excited. Dr. Lucas has discovered that if the human brain is exposed to ultraviolet light, a human's lifespan will double.
I watched this movie on the streaming service Tubi, which basically has every single movie in existence. Like, if you're trying to find movies that are even low-budget trash like this, more than likely Tubi's gonna have it. But I watched it on Tubi, and I guess they cut off the last 2 minutes, but I heard that the last 2 minutes of the movie, after the credits, there's like outtake footage where they show Amber Lynn just like talking to the guys who are making the movie off screen or whatever. Makes me wonder what that footage actually looks like, because I couldn't find it. But I mean, somebody told me that that's how the actual movie ends. So if anything, that sounds a little bit more interesting than the actual movie. Imagine if they made an entire movie like that. Like, instead of My Day with Marilyn, it's My Day with Amber Lynn. But anyway, in between all these scenes with Amber Lynn as this newscaster talking about stuff, things, going with the title, the main plot involves these two guys that go to this house that's owned by this Dr. Lucas. And for a good chunk of the movie, nothing happens. Just like with Manos, the Hands of Fate, where there's lots of scenes of people just standing around, looking at things, not talking, letting shitty music ramble on in the background. There is a lot of that in this movie. There's just plenty of scenes, like when they first show up to the house, no shit, they actually, the first thing that they think of is, all right, you think this house has any fucking beer, eh?
Sure, Doug won't mind if we have a few of his beer.
And then there's just plenty of scenes where it's just them dicking around in the kitchen trying to find things, like they're going through the cabinets. And it's interesting because the way the scene plays out, it looks like people who had never seen a kitchen before.
Getting kind of nosy, aren't we?
Where is this going? And it goes on for so long. There's a part where they're making sandwiches in the kitchen to go with their beer. It went on for so long that I did something I rarely do. I started skipping because it's like, all right, this is going fucking nowhere. I want to get this movie over with. The movie is like an hour and a half long. If it was probably shorter, like if they actually trimmed the fat and got to most of the stuff that happens later on in the movie, then maybe I'd accept it. But all these scenes of people just like looking around, looking through the kitchen, rummaging for beer, I couldn't take it. So I started skipping scenes. While they're rummaging through the kitchen, they come across a book that, here's where the Evil Dead comparison comes in. It's supposed to clearly be like their version of the Necronomicon, and I guess they end up summoning some kind of evil spirit.
Guys, pretty strange.
So it feels like the movie's explanation for all the weird stuff that's going on is it's half evil demon spirits and half Dr. Lucas is doing, because halfway through the movie, the guy from the beginning who was fantasizing about having sex with his wife in a devil mask, halfway through the movie, he shows up at the house and says that he sent his wife to Dr. Lucas to try and impregnate her because he really wanted kids. And here's where it's implied that Dr. Lucas did some kind of experimentation on her, and now the house is overrun with things, monstrous creatures, which mostly just look like really crappy looking bug prosthetics. Like they look like they're like spiders and ants, and yeah, these people are getting attacked by these fake bug monster things. That look like shitty Halloween decorations. And that's pretty much the rest of the movie when large stretches of nothing are happening. There's also a part fairly early on when they're first going through the house. It sounds like they're trying to rip off the Friday the 13th sound effect. After long stretches of nothing, where these guys are just sitting around, rummaging through the kitchen, reading the not Necronomicon book, eating bread sandwiches, and then going through the house, they come across a dead body, which is supposed to be the wife of the guy from the beginning. And then that's when he shows up later on and talks about how he sent his wife to Dr. Lucas to try and get like artificial insemination so that they can have kids. But I guess he killed her and experimented on her, and that's why these bug monsters are running around. I guess you think that they would just stick with one explanation and just stay with that. It's like, okay, either the monsters are running around because they're creations of this Dr. Lucas guy, or have it be that they were summoned by the Satan book, like from Evil Dead. But it feels like they couldn't figure out what they wanted to do exactly. Oh, and the best part of the not Necronomicon book, they actually have a thing where one of them says like, oh yeah, this looks like that book from that one movie where all the crazy evil stuff was going on.
How'd that movie start that you're always talking about? You know, that weird one with all those weird things?
On top of that, there's a scene with Amber Lynn where she's talking about George Romero is seeing the Supreme Court to talk about copyright disputes or something.
George Romero, director of such hits as Dawn of the Dead and Creepshow, is once again taking his copyright case to the Supreme Court of the United States.
It kind of falls into that same rule of don't reference a good movie in your crappy movie. It's like, man, don't remind me that I could be watching Evil Dead right now instead of watching Things. That's really the issue with this movie, is that you look at Evil Dead, that was clearly, a very low-budget passion project by a couple of friends that didn't really have a whole lot to work with, but it became this huge horror cult classic because Sam Raimi is a great visionary director who has lots of passion in what he does, and you had charisma with actors like Bruce Campbell and the rest of the cast, but here, this is like watching a glorified home movie. Like, it really does feel like you're just watching some horror short made by a bunch of kids in their backyard, or in this case, like some cabin in the woods that they knew and they wanted to film at. And they're like, oh yeah, that movie Evil Dead, we've seen that a million times. We can do that, eh? After the opening guy joins up with them, one of the two guys ends up getting attacked and possibly killed by one of the bug monsters. And then there's just, again, more long stretches of nothing happening. There's a part where they sit down to have a beer. At this point, they should pretty much just leave the house, but they're just going to stay there because the movie needs to be an hour and a half long, I guess. There's a part where it's like, oh, did you hear that? No, I didn't hear nothing either.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I didn't hear nothing at all.
Thank you for that. That was incredibly necessary. Power ends up going out. They go down to the basement to check it. There's some kind of giant spider monster down there, I guess. And then the opening guy ends up getting attacked. And halfway through the movie, it feels like it was dubbed. Like, they didn't have any organic audio, like, from the on-camera mic. So they had to go back and dub audio later. Because there are just long stretches before that where there's no audio and barely any music. And the music that is there is fucking terrible. But then in this part of the movie, it feels like they're like, oh man, we don't want anything to be too quiet. So then their substitute is to just have the actors just mumble a bunch of mishmash over the footage. So it's like, it's clearly recorded after the fact. It's like watching like a dubbed version of an old Godzilla movie. And, it's just the people trying to say things to fill up the dead air. It's like, oh no, you got bit. Oh no, I gotta pick your body up. Oh man, you're real heavy. Oh, I gotta put you down for a sec. Oh man, there's lots of blood leaking out.
Oh, I hammered your head in. Are you alright? Blood. Oh, gotta get some bandages to you. Oh, you heavy thug.
I don't even know what to say, honestly. The other guy that got attacked earlier turns out to be okay. And of course, what's his immediate thought? Not try to get out of the house. He wants to go back upstairs and get a beer. But then a bug monster shows up, bites his arm, and then he bleeds out. And they try to like solderize it, like they stick it, they put like some fire over it. Oh, and I love this. While this is going on, the other guy goes over to the power box.
I better watch myself. I'm not very good at electricity things.
So the two guys that were attacked, they end up bleeding out and dying off. The remaining guy runs upstairs, and here the house is overrun with bug monsters. And what does he do? Again, instead of just simply leaving the house, he falls asleep on the couch so that these things can multiply. And yeah, he crash lands on the couch, starts sleeping, and then it cuts to an Amber Lynn scene. And then it cuts back, and oh no, now the house is filled with even more of these bug monsters. And then Dr. Lucas shows up.
I'm Dr. Lucas, down from Grizzly Flats.
So you're the fucking bastard, huh? Susan's dead, everybody's dead, all because of you.
Back to my point earlier where everybody looks like a 70s porn star. This guy, he's got the tacky shirt on. I forget if he has glasses, but he also has the 70s porn star mustache going, like every other guy in this movie. And it's funny, they couldn't even give him a lab coat to imply that he's supposed to be a doctor. Okay. So yeah, he comes home and the main guy starts freaking out at him because he's the bastard responsible for all of this. And again, instead of running out of the house right away, he just starts showing him what's going on with the house. And then he finally runs out of the house when, oh, Dr. Lucas gets attacked by one of the bug monsters.
Don't turn your back. Please don't leave me now. I need you in
as the remaining guy runs out of the house, he starts like flailing all about, and then he finally comes across somebody just kind of hitchhiking or fishing out in the wilderness, I guess, nearby. He runs over to him and is like, hey, we gotta go get the police. We gotta get the authorities involved. There's this Dr. Lucas guy. He's experimenting and doing all these horrible things, eh?
Dr. Lucas, he's the one! Creatures were everywhere! He did an experiment, he did!
Is that really what happened?
Yeah, that's what happened! Let's go to the police!
What's also really great about this part is, first of all, the audio comes back. Like, it's no longer, oh, hey, we're recording the audio after the fact, and now it sounds all muffled and compressed for some reason. So the audio is back. It sounds like it was actually recorded organically, so that's good. Secondly, and more importantly, the one time in the movie where they try to imply that this is not Canadian, and then
Be back to Sacramento!
the movie is almost over. I don't know why they decided to try and make it like, oh no, this was in America the whole time, when no other part of the movie tried distinguishing that. You know what, now that I think about it, it's probably a good thing that this came out when it did. Could you imagine if these people tried making a ripoff of the Human Centipede? You know, oh, crazy doctor doing experimentation on people. Let's be glad that they tried ripping off Evil Dead instead of waiting a couple of years to rip off that movie. Back to the house. It turns out this was all really a dream. Main guy ends up waking up and discovering Dr. Lucas is like a zombie, or is like, you know, like a mauled, disfigured version of himself from the monster bug attack.
Dead or alive, we're all gonna get you. We don't wait a long, long time.
And I shit you not, this is pretty much where the movie ends. You know, the guy, you know, he leans against like a bookshelf or something, and behind him is a bug monster, and he goes, oh, don't worry, I'll be okay. Like, oh, it's supposed to imply like, oh, it was just a dream, none of it was real. But then you see that there's one of those bug monsters up there, and oh, it really did happen. Oh, it wasn't just a dream.
I'll be okay. 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 I'll be okay.
Oh my god. Okay, so things. Like I said, I think that they didn't just call this series of random images because Turkish Star Wars already has that title.
What a bunch of trash.
Now, like always, with the other shot-on-video movies that I've done for Blockbusters show, whether it be Crazy Fat Ethel 2 or Prehistoric Bimbos in Armageddon City, they're not very good, but on some level I do want to say, hey, these people with very minimal resources went out, they made a movie, sold it in video stores. On some level, good for them. That being said, of all the shot-on-video movies I've done for Blockbusters, I think this is the worst one. I mean, okay, Crazy Fat Ethel 2 and Prehistoric Bimbos in Armageddon City, not good, but Prehistoric Bimbos, I can at least give a little bit of slack because it was made by a bunch of 16-year-olds. So, you know, there's a little bit of leeway there just based on like, well, they were young when they made it, so, you know, they probably didn't have a whole lot to work with. And Crazy Fat Ethel 2, as bad as that was at least a sequel to some 70s gore film where it was like, oh, we were able to get the original actress to come back and have her star amongst a bunch of friends of the directors that also worked at the local Walmart, I guess. So on the other hand, this feels like it's not only trying too hard to be the next Evil Dead, but it doesn't really do it well. And easily the worst thing about it is that it's so fucking boring. Almost nothing happens for a majority of the film. That's what makes it so impossible to sit through, and that's why I started skipping a bunch of scenes, because it's like, all right, nothing is happening. It's like, it's just fucking slow. Like, I have not seen a movie this boring for Blockbuster show since probably Manos the Hands of Fate, and close second would probably be Doomsday Machine. That and Screaming Skull, that had a bunch of slow parts in it too. But this even more so than those, really boring. Long stretches of just people dicking around, hovering around this kitchen, you know, getting beer, making food, wandering through hallways, that horrible music going on throughout it. And when stuff finally gets going and you see like these monster effects, it's like, oh, that's really cheap, man. It's like, even for a movie with I think on IMDb it was listed as like $35,000 budget, which even for independent movies that's really cheap. Even knowing that, I'm just like, oh, these are not very good creature puppets. To the movie's credit, there are some funny bad things in it, but it's nowhere near something like Flying Ryan or Cool Cat or The Room, Birdemic, even Amazing Bulk. Amazing Bulk was just so fucking weird in its existence. This is just more like, oh, this is just a bunch of people trying to make the next Evil Dead. And it's just mostly boring for a lot of it. Like, it just drags on so much and barely anything happens. Yeah, that's what really kills it for me. It's like, I wanted this to be a so bad it's good movie, and while there are a few moments like that in the film, it doesn't have enough to make it like, oh yeah, this is the next Troll 2 or The Room. It's not really like that. But yeah, as of now, Things, quite possibly the worst shot on video movie I've seen. Apparently Amber Lynn said that she remembered working on the movie and that she had fun with the people that made it, so if anything, there is that. You know, at least they were nice. Yeah, that's something. But man, yeah, this movie, it was kind of a slog to sit through, I gotta say. But anyway, as for what we're doing next time on Blockbusters Show, we are going to be doing a double feature, and we're going to be talking about 2 movies that involve animals attacking people. One is a horror film, and one is a family film. I'm very curious to see what people are going to guess it'll be, so have fun guessing what it's going to be in the comments. But until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.